Hey, everybody. I am so excited for this chat today with a leader from the tech and IT powerhouse known as Infosys. Prasad, how are you?
Doing good, Ivan. Thank you so much for having me here.
Glad to have you here. You're in sunny but cold Atlanta. We're used to the cold weather. I know you aren't down south, but we're inside, luckily. Maybe introduce yourself, and to those who haven't heard of Infosys, how do you describe yourselves these days?
So, Infosys, my parent organization, is possibly one of the best kept secrets that many people don't know. But if you have used a lot of new technology, if you flew on a plane, if you have used engineering products or services from financial institutions, healthcare companies, chances are the technology is managed by my company. And that's who we are, one of the largest IT outsourcers, business process outsourcing firms headquartered out of Bangalore, India. And I lead Infosys's innovation efforts. I've been dedicated into emerging technology, innovation platforms kind of activity for last several years and have been privileged to drive some of the company initiatives.
Yeah, and in fact, almost 30 years at Infosys. So I won't say you're getting old, but you've seen a lot at the helm of so much innovation and best practices out there. So talk about the culture at Infosys when it comes to innovation, when it comes to creating IP. Where are you now? And maybe talk about the evolution revolution that you've seen.
To be fair, I've been with Infosys for 19 years, and the IT
Oh, okay.
industry of this kind, the sort of global delivery model and so on, at the number of years you talked about. I've seen the evolution of this industry from sort of smaller companies starting and to a point where some of the biggest firms, especially if you look at the headcount that these companies have, it's a very large organization. And in many ways, large program management and innovations associated with that kind of scale management. Probably the IT world saw that scale in the Y2K timeframe, late 90s, in that sense, when a massive scale problem was to be solved, and it needed hands, eyes, ears to make sure that we go through that. I think that's where the big scale change for the Indian IT industry per se happened, and I was part of this revolution. In the younger days of that type, I had the opportunity to see the sort of distinction between what is labor versus or labor arbitrage versus the need for automation. The kind of scale that was required to be addressed in Y2K times was possibly my first introduction to level of automation. How can you bring in tools? How can you combine innovatively what is otherwise compiler construction technologies and things of that type into solving a very different scale of problem statement. And since then, I have been involved with large scale technology transformation projects, adoption of emerging technologies, capabilities that need to happen. And one thing that I definitely realized is it's everybody's problem. Innovation, and this
Mm.
is not just the cliche, but fact that we started doing it, we had to get the entire corporation. I was with a different company at that point in time. We had to get everybody to think through use of automation and what it means to convert lines of code, Y2K terms, or how many dates would you convert. To today, when we look at generative AI and the impact that the generative AI takes, it's all about everybody needs to think about it, not get scared, not be afraid of the issues that it may pose, the risks it may pose. Depending on the challenge statement, I am on the forefront of innovation, so I will take bigger risks, bigger failures. Somebody who is doing stable systems needs to keep the lights on at all times, needs to have that correct approach to say, is everything tested, is everything ready to be pushed over the line, because beyond that there's no point of return, and that's a crucial safeguard that we need to have. So culture of Infosys, our culture of innovation in Infosys, is built around that it's everyone's challenge. Everybody needs to look at what needs to be done. We have built harvesting methods, capabilities where things that we sense at smaller or day-to-day project levels are harvested up. I tend to call them as small eyes becoming big eyes. And over time, they become our service offerings, they become our platforms, IP accelerators, and capabilities of that type, which eventually our customers will launch as their products.
So interesting, and such an interesting approach. And you have so many internal and external initiatives, strategies. I've heard about the Living Labs initiative. I've heard about the Next program. Tell us about that, these initiatives and how they work and evolve over time.
In many ways, what we realized is, especially as our scale started to change, we realized that we become the it of their IT, they being the
Mm.
customers. And many a times people will around and say that, hey, you are running this function, come and tell us what's the impact, what is the directional change, what's the strategy that we need to adopt, which vendor is better, which product, which technology should we be taking on. So there is an inherent, as you start running these operations, there is an inherent need to make sure that we are on top of what's changing and working. So in that spectrum is where I came up, me and my team came up with these two things called NEXT, new emerging exploratory technologies. These are things that are likely to come and hit us in a few years from now. We may not be ready for it. And then Living Labs is a capability where there are people, props, and technology. Props are important aspect of it because it gives you a distinction that I'm away. It's a little bit like offsite, right? Why do we go offsite and do our meetings? You change the surroundings, and that's what makes things differently. We created this setup. We have today 14 Living Labs across the globe. We have
Wow.
set up Living Labs for many of our clients where we would bring in this element. The notion is emerging technology led programmatic innovation that can be driven and institutionalized within companies. First, ours, we need to try it ourselves and make sure that this is correctly done. And the second part that happens is how do we impart the principles that have been learned, the culture of innovation, the capability to experiment, role of ecosystems, role of hyperscalers and startups, range of partners that need to come, avoid the fear of failure, or if you're going to fail in a controlled manner, thereby you can work the scale, learn the ropes that are customized for your organization, again starting with ourselves and then going into other clients organizations to make sure that this happens. This is essentially the foundation of what Next program is, where we work through adoption of new technologies, and the Living Labs, which allows not just the emerging technologies, but emerging technology led other problems that need to be solved in order to manage the kind of scale of business that we deliver to our clients.
Wow. Brilliant approach. And you champion the idea of nonlinear revenue models. The idea that traditional IT services companies, you need to hire more people to drive revenue, and that's not necessarily the case. So tell us more.
So I had my fair amount of contributions into it, but it would be fair to say that at some point in time, as an industry inflection point, we realized that people dependence alone and the linearity of revenue to say that headcount translates into a certain commerce and becomes the revenue or top line of the company is not going to work. And we had to find different ways to say that element is introduced in that sense. Even product companies have a degree of linearity. How many licenses do you sell times the revenue per license is what becomes the linearity element in their case. Uh, what we did is two parts. One, can we change the top line to reflect nonlinearity? So for us, we were people based, selling anything on the lines of product IP, uh, bundled in services that can be brought in, or bundled in products that can be ordered in, which do not need us to add headcount, becomes
Mm.
nonlinear for us. That's one definition of it. The second definition is hitting the bottom line side of the story, where can you do the task without necessarily adding, which means you have to think about automation, you have to look at tool enabled capabilities where same team can lift more, which again translates into non-linearity in that sense. And this approach of driving both sides is what led to what is today gets described as nonlinear revenues.
Yeah, that's a very powerful concept when put in action. Uh, we all talk about the power of ecosystems in tech these days, and you've built a really interesting ecosystem called the Infosys Innovation Network. Describe how that works and the role of partners and startups in the Infosys Innovation Network. How does that work exactly?
So the routing of that is essentially embedded in the fact that no amount of innovation dollars or R&D dollars from my company or our client partners from whom we can
Mm.
draw some of the discretionary funds and savings and so on can match the velocity, variety, and the veracity of what startup world does. There is
Mm.
a risk that startup world tends to be a bit unstable for large corporations. So there is a degree of fear factor involved to say, is this for me or not? This is where we felt we could come in as a we had that sort of a landscape available to say that we are running IT. We should be able to see what's going on in this. A lot of cloud adoption is happening. So how do you reduce cost of adopting cloud, for example, just as an illustration? We started looking around and say that this is where if somebody like us can underwrite the innovation, bring the benefits of startup led innovation, which is high quality, but in some sense it's mitigated to say that we will protect this. We will make sure that when it lands into an enterprise landscape, it has a degree of care, love, sort of hand holding that needs to happen in order for this little company to work in a very large behemoth otherwise.
Mm.
That's how we curated the network. We today have roughly about 300 companies that are curated and made part of
Wow.
Infosys Innovation Network. We scan thousands. I mean, literally, they're ranging from early investment all the way to mature unicorn-ready startup structures that exist today in the marketplace. Clearly focused on our business and what we do for our customers. So there is an element of technology, element of automation, element of cost management, element of new directions and technology adoptions that needs to happen, which is in place. So ranging from how do you optimize cloud costs to what's the next that is likely to come in Gen AI. The full spectrum of companies is visible. But our goal is to make sure that they are correctly curated based on what we know about our customers' landscape. And then our clients will experience the IIN side with our service offerings that are built around the startup capabilities, our platforms products where the startup IP may be embedded, or we have ability to say that let's go do a roadshow to the client in different forms. Again, there are different ways because we ourselves are also not clear, even though we are working with these startups, as to how will this gestate, how will this exactly be positioned with the client. And we have found tremendous benefit that if you sort of do these work together, what may start as a speed dating ends up becoming a long-term relationship over a period of time. And that's really the role that IIN has given us, that it has given us an inorganic scale that is required to drive the efforts of changing organizations on client side as well as our side.
A brilliant approach. And speaking of partnerships, Infosys works with partners with all of the major hyperscalers out there, these hyper growth cloud companies that we know and love today. Describe the partnership model and the win-win that you deliver for the customers through those partnerships.
It's an interesting sort of yin and yang that especially in the last several years has shaped up. That in some sense, both the technologies behemoths, the GCPs, the AWSs, the Microsoft Azures, are services companies. So are we, services companies. Little different, but the changeover has occurred where both sides are matching together. There is a difference in the type of services we provide. There is a difference in which, but the commonalities of consume and pay as you go are very similar in both sides. Being
Mm.
able to partner on those lines to understand client requirements and say that as we move towards use as required, pay by use kind of models, and that was the model even in our services, that we were making fixed employee cost into a variable labor pool that would go in the most fundamental nature of it. What we have found is mature technologies and cost optimization imperatives, large scale, which is core of the business on either side, has the scale orientation. New areas, new capabilities requires experimentation, and the Approaches of Next, approaches of Living Labs work very well with these hyperscalers because they are very much technology providers as well. As an example, we have a quantum computing living lab with
Mm.
AWS that was announced a couple of years back as a joint effort between the two organizations that we have been working through. We have done enough work and more on things like Microsoft Mesh, which are 360 environments and capabilities as the world of 3D technologies, 3D immersive environments start to come in front of us. And in some sense, web starts to become three-dimensional and it starts to become distributory control. Sort of think of it as current parlance wise, you would hear technologies like Web 3.0, metaverse kind of terminology that will get thrown around. We're starting to see this full spectrum, lights on, stable,
Mm.
solid infrastructure, solid services, sort of capabilities that our clients will drive, and the when you open your bank account, when you want your money withdrawn, it works. Or when you're watching a movie, it works, it's there, you start from the next second and it's given to you. That sort of reliability with what's coming new being paired up through our innovation. That's
Fantastic. Yeah, so interesting. Um, so let's talk about leadership. You've been a leader in so many different roles and positions. The global elite, the global leaders are gathering in Davos this week, today. Following that with interest, it's never been more challenging time to be a leader, a business leader, a politician. Very high reward slash risk, risk slash reward. What qualities do you think are necessary in this new age for today's leaders, and any personal or other professional insights you can share there?
I think you mentioned Davos. There is also Australian Open going on, and if you watch pretty much every game, you will see some of the platforms capabilities that our teams have deployed in there as well. Infosys has a big role in how tennis is experienced these days in some of the
Oh, I
major
love that.
tournaments, and a lot of innovation in that spirit. That we were one of the first to deliver 360 transmission of tennis matches a few years back at Australian Open around this
Wow.
time, pre-pandemic kind of a view. And in all these years of driving some of these scale innovations, one of the things that I have personally learned the right way, I got mentors in my early career. Never be afraid of failure, or don't be worried about what will happen if I don't succeed. I think that to me is the single biggest thing that I have worked on. I have never been afraid of working with the technology. I mean, many times I see people doing simple things like they'll not press enter on a laptop, and I get impatient with that. I say, just press enter, it's okay. What will happen? It's just a machine. At best, it'll beep at you. That's all it's going to do. But if you enlarge that, I think if you bring it up over so many years, making sure that you're curious, working through with what's changing, read news, read books, read papers, whether they're academia kind or just blogs, follow events. So I've been following CES, for example, with
Mm,
curiosity. I have a belief system that if things start to work in consumer world, they will come to enterprise world.
mm.
Gen AI, in some sense, shook my belief system a little bit, but I'm still pretty stable that for a year, this technology has remained on a hyper curve and has sort of changed some of the assumptions, parameterization that we see. But to me, that's still a anomaly over 30 years that I have seen. I would like to be wrong in this case. And as a technologist, I always believe that I would like to be wrong. But some technologies have taken multitude of years, which means you need patience to work with. Some technologies come ahead of time, which means you should not be shy of turning it around and saying that
Mm.
that's okay. We were a little ahead of time, mothball it, bring it back. It's very hard to cancel any project, especially for technologists. So we have to mothball, wait for the right time, and put it back into the play as we go. This is a business that is entirely driven by influence. No CEO, no CIO, no CTO, no CFO actually comes and says, innovation is what I want to invest in, barring a few startup companies or entities of that kind. And even there, the innovation dollars are small. Only way you will succeed as a leader in making an impact through this new thinking, different thinking, try do something differently, is if you network and create the influence levels that are required. So those are two soft skills that are required, and then hire people who are smarter than you. I'm blessed with a team of engineers, team of scientists, team of architects who continue to take this approach and continue to surprise me literally every day. And that's what makes the innovation so much more interesting.
Oh, wonderful thoughts and insights there. Talk about the other challenge that's top of mind to everyone in the C-suite: security, cybersecurity. You do a ton of advisory and implementation work there. What are some of the most pressing challenges in 2024? And what are the emerging opportunities for companies to help clients with these challenges?
I think on cybersecurity, even we could possibly do a session by itself, but even it's that sort of paramount topic. But I have two sides of it. There is a side in me who is a rebellion, who feels very threatened with cybersecurity because it
Mm,
curtails my ability to try different things.
mm.
Simple things like I can't run everything on the laptop that I have. I have to figure out a different laptop on which I'll run things, because this laptop, the one that we are talking on, is an enterprise laptop and harnessed well. So the rebellion in me continues to tell me, not because I'm a bad guy, but because I want to experiment. I want to try different things. I want to install software, which rightfully, if not done well, if not done through the process of filtering, vetting, and capabilities that our cybersecurity professionals advocate, will cause harm to the large enterprise. So I've learned to work this where you create sandboxes, you create controlled environments in which cybersecurity can be addressed for innovation, or in some cases, emerging technologies. For example, there isn't a very good way of handling what you do with your headsets. If you're in the
Mm,
metaverse play and you're looking at 360 world and you find interesting use cases, they have to be harnessed well before enterprises can actually bring the real data, real information flow, and so on.
mm.
So that's one side of me. The innovator in me feels constrained at times, but it's not a bad thing. It's the right thing. The other part is the innovations in cybersecurity itself, especially when you look at Gen AI kind of technologies, and the definition of cybersecurity changing towards security and privacy together. And I think that's an interesting evolution that we are starting to see. I think engineers working on cybersecurity will find ways to secure us, whether it is securing the boundaries, perimeters, security, securing the gates and windows, and having the right postures and capabilities, working with, if at all somebody was to attack, come here, I'll give you something to work with so that I can keep an eye on what you're doing. In the process, improve the organizational processes, the respect for what you do or what you don't do, kind of things. I also believe security is something that is in the minds of people. For example, when a teenager puts something on social media, are they worried about the security, or is that an
Mm.
accepted paradigm of security in that world? I think both answers are correct. If I'm putting money in a safe deposit vault, the level of security that I expect is different than when I put my picture on social media. That's a different inherent capability. So we are working on some of these elements of how people perceive security, how people perceive privacy. What is technology doing to us in changing these paradigms? And some of the newer technologies, they're not stable by any means. Like, what is quantum encryption and what does that do? And if somebody
Mm.
else is using quantum encryption against me, how do I make sure that I'm
Mm.
protected well enough when the attack is happening on me? So it's a double-edged sword. End of the day, technology is just that. It's a piece of technology. It's in whose hands it is that decides, is it productive or destructive? And that's what we have to work through. As an innovator, I focus on creating options, and then there are many, many more talents who can figure out how to best use it, protect it, and I rely on that.
Well said. Finally, here we've been in the technology world for decades, but what about the younger, up and coming IT professionals and recent graduates? Any advice to give those folks on building their career in IT and innovation, especially in this environment that's constantly evolving and there's so much change, disruption, and tech is no longer a guarantee of a great career or job? What say you?
I think any area, any career, any domain that has a constant change and an acceleration that is happening is ripe with careers. It's for
Mm.
people to find the pathways, adopt their tooling, adopt their learning curves in that manner. When you and I started our careers in technology or related spaces, there was a certain pace and acceleration that we experienced. At this stage of our careers, that pace may look like too fast, but somebody who is coming in, it's like when I remember Olympics, that 10-second mark being broken for 100 meters was a big thing. Now 9-second mark is a big thing and people work towards it. It has become faster, right? That race has become faster. That doesn't mean 100 meters or athletics of that kind is uninteresting. It has become even more interesting. More technology will come into play, more capabilities would be required. Resilience is different. The pace at which you change and adapt is different. So learn to use those at your pace. A 20-year-old is the way I would look at it. I think the field is still very much exciting. If I could become 20-year-old again, I would love to, and get back into the technology. I wouldn't do anything differently.
Well, great advice. I would concur. I would take that over $10 million. That's for sure. To be 20 again. We're right in 2024 already. The news cycle is on high alert. So much happening. A little scary as well. Well, what are you excited about for this year? What do you have on your agenda? Any trips or events or initiatives that you care to share?
I think I will continue. We will continue to see role of Gen AI evolving
Mm,
and becoming more and more mainstay. The hype cycle will go away. I think that's definitely a visible trend, which means it's going to become more mainstay. That I'm trying some sort of infatuation projects too. There is real meat underneath it. I think AI will also start to see a little bit more than text in the mainstream. So the multimodality of things that we do, most of us work with voice, video, images,
mm,
sensory inputs, and so on. And in some sense, getting those senses integrated into AI will start to happen. We already have some of this. Our privacy and related evolution of frameworks, laws, that I think is an interesting trend. What industry typically calls it responsible AI,
mm,
where the principles of societal beliefs is evolving alongside the legislative and governance beliefs, and then the technology is constantly pushing the envelope. Gen AI has taught us in many ways that societal influencing has to happen at the same pace, and for a change has matched it. If you look at presidential executive orders that have come out in last 3 months on responsible AI, is an indication that legislation or governance will match lockstep barrel with the technology change, like generative AI that is happening. I would still think metaverse is hot. It's not in the term metaverse, but I think, and this is something that we had always known. It's not a new, at least for me as a technologist, it doesn't surprise me. Web will become 3D 360. Experiences will become
mm.
limitless in that sense. Instead of looking at a flat XY dimensional screen that we tend to interact with, more sensory inputs will come into play. You're starting to see some of that. It is still challenged with the weight of the headset, which will have to get lightened. But if you follow CES or some of the glass announcements, you can see that.
Mm.
Uh, I fully expect more and more augmented reality kind of capabilities to come. Quantum is starting to show relevance to mainstream in that sense. It's still early, but it's starting to show relevance. And my favorite topic is how will this all, I took like two or three different examples: Gen AI, responsible AI, multimodal AI, uh, how we experience technologies, but the whole societal evolution of inclusivity and the directives around that, and the confluence or sort of what will happen as innovation within boundaries. So role of generative AI and how will I do sort of user interfaces or user experiences will cross with one another. Role of generative AI and how security will happen. So you'll see innovation accelerating at the boundaries of what is otherwise considered independent spaces. And that should be an interesting one to watch for 2024.
Well said. So much to watch. Thank you so much for being here. Really amazing insights and a real insider's perspective. I learned a lot. And thanks, Prasad. Thanks for watching, everyone. Reach out to Infosys, follow them on social media. They have some amazing content. And stay warm. I know it's Atlanta, you're not used to the freezing temperatures, so be safe. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.